an official debate. We have Theo, we have Footsoldier. For this debate, Theo is taking the position that we should define veganism as animal products boycott, which is primarily against animal agriculture, and not the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals, which is vague and excludes people with other ethical systems. Footsoldier's taking the opposition. As always, winner will be based upon who concedes. If we don't get a vocal concession, we'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can vote on who you think performed better overall in the debate. There'll be no moderation, no time limit. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Okay, great. I'll give a 4-minute case for my argument. So, how to explain what we so it basically comes down to how we should explain what's the best way of explaining what veganism is. I define veganism as simply an animal products boycott. I make the point of saying it's one campaign tactic among many, aimed primarily at achieving the end of animal agriculture, and say why someone would arrive at that ethical conclusion could be a million ways. But the three main ethical schools of thought you could draw from are consequentialism, virtue ethics, and deontology. So why not use other definitions? The reason I would encourage people use the definition an animal products boycott and not other definitions is it gets at the root motivation people have for being vegan without being divisive about which ethical system is best. In 1944, those members of the Vegetarian Society who were avoiding all use of animal products created their own vegan society and came up with the word vegan. They did this out of a concern that we should be advocating the boycott of the dairy and egg industries. Now, I acknowledge that one problem with defining veganism as an animal product boycott is people saying, well, would you be okay with hunting wild animals yourself then? But to that I would answer, implicit in the word boycott is an ethical judgment on the activity that creates the product. So when I boycott products containing palm oil because of rainforest destruction needed to produce that product, for example, it wouldn't suddenly be okay for me to then go out and do that rainforest destruction myself just because I didn't sell the palm oil on. You can't desire that all commercial use of animal products stop existing in the world through a commercial boycott, and also do an action which, through your boycotting, hope to prevent the incentive for it ever happening. Now, does this definition leave room for any exceptions to the rule? Well, yes, in a way, but I would say a positive one, in that it allows for waste animal products to be used if no profit finds its way back to the person who caused the harm. If you can get a supermarket to redirect its 1,000 loaves of bread containing a small amount of whey in it from going in the dumpster to a food bank, that can only be a benefit to the world. Also, it doesn't attempt to include animal entertainment boycotts in what it means to be vegan, and simply leaves that to be included in what it means to be an animal rights advocate. Although it's so similar, one could raise an eyebrow about why someone would boycott the animal agriculture industry and not animal cruelty as entertainment. People already view veganism as simply abstaining from the use of animal products, like food and leather. So we just do have to contend with why awful people like some eco-fascists desire to be vegans and denounce them separately. To try and pretend that someone boycotting animal products can't also be an awful person in other ways is willfully ignorant. In the same way, claiming that ex-vegans could never have been vegan for not having understood the ethical argument is fallacious and off-putting. So what specifically is wrong with other definitions? Well, you could say, why not define veganism as reducing suffering, which is the consequentialist reason for being vegan? Because reducing suffering is too big, too abstract, too idealistic, beyond the capacity of one person to ever achieve. Laudable but doomed to failure. Whereas boycotting animal products is not. Reducing suffering creates the impression of the martyr, the need to live a ridiculously Puritan lifestyle, like Jain monks sweeping the floor everywhere they walk, and excludes all other ethical systems. So why not define veganism as a rule that man should not exploit animal, which is the deontological reason for being vegan? Because it immediately brings to mind the plenty of ways we can pragmatically rescue animals and improve their circumstances, while still less obviously, but still exploitatively keeping them captive, e.g. rescuing dogs, chickens, or horses, and again excludes all other ethical systems. Finally, why not define veganism as a hodgepodge of the two main ethical systems, consequentialism and deontology, as the modern vegan society tries to do? Because it's far too convoluted, and open to misinterpretation. You get into debates about what does as far as is possible and practical mean, when you could just say veganism is a boycott. If you aren't capable of participating for being eating disordered, for example, that's okay. You can be ethically on par with or more ethical than a vegan in your own way, but you just aren't able to participate in the boycott. So that's my argument. You can come back at me on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just finishing my mouthful of peanut butter toast.
Sounds good. Yeah, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so there's a few things there. The main problem that I have with this definition,
Mhm.
well, there's two main problems, and they're sort of two different sides of the same coin. So, firstly, the definition isn't allowing us to understand a principle which guides our behavior. You're starting off with behavior, which then you can infer a principle from, and then infer more behavior from. You
Mhm.
said there in your introductory speech. And to me, that sounds really weird. And then, secondly, it doesn't even get at what we mean by vegans in the first place, right? Because a zoo is not a boycott of animal products.
Mhm.
You could go to the zoo without boycotting animal products. You could go hunting and still like boycott animal products.
No,
It has nothing to do with an animal product boycott, right? So what you're saying is you have to then, from this behavior of boycotting animal products, infer the principle and then infer the behavior that going to the zoo or hunting is bad. But that just sounds like a really weird way about approaching it when you could just have a principle which governs all possible behavior that you might encounter which would exploit animals. So the original definition, which allows us to understand a principle whereby a behavior follows from that, seems to me to make more sense than starting with a behavior, going back to a principle, and then inferring new behavior. That just seems really weird, and I think that would be like the reason why I would just reject your new definition as just unintuitive and silly.
okay. Well, I would appeal to other boycotts in the world that don't need to like narrow down to like one philosophy reason why people are boycotting. South African apartheid, hang on, I can Montgomery bus boycott. Like people, like when you like the benefit is it's immediately relatable to other boycotts, and it's focused the conversation on it being a political tactic. So I don't know. Like I think we like it focuses the conversation. It doesn't encompass everything about who you are. I don't think we should try to do that. It creates like it make like a bit of a cult image. Yeah, I think there was a mistake at the beginning trying to vegan society. I think it's like hang on. Yeah, the vegan society was an error trying to force a meaning onto veganism that didn't represent all the members' reasons for creating the society. It's like trying to make the definition of vegan as the sorry, one second. It's like trying to say what defines veganism as people who wear pink hats. It was never going to come into popular usage, and it would have been detrimental if it had. The debates that led up to the creation of the vegan society were about the dairy industry. They were raised equally from a concern about well-being and about rights. Dr. Anna Bonus Kingford, a member of the Vegetarian Society in 1944, argued for a total boycott of animal products, saying the dairy industry, quote, must involve some slaughter, I think, and some suffering to the cows and calves. So to try and exclude consequentialists from what it means to be vegan is a mistake.
Well, look, if you've got you mentioned their pink hats, it would be silly to say that vegans are people who wear pink
Mm-hmm.
hats. Well, I agree because that's a behavior, the behavior of wearing pink hats. Why would the vegans wear pink hats? If there was some ethical grounding, some principle for why they would be wearing the pink hats, then it would be more like a vegan is someone who wears pink hats because we feel that the color pink is the most ethical color, and we feel that wearing hats is very necessary to protect our heads from falling raindrops or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we wear pink hats. But you're just saying, um, define it as pink hats, or define it as a boycott, or define it as this, define it as that. No, you can't define a principle as a behavior. You have to define a principle as a principle and then derive the behavior from it. And that's the problem with your proposed definition, is it's a behavior and not a principle. So we don't understand. And you've appealed to previous boycotts. We can just think about what happened in India when Gandhi tried to boycott the British, or like British products. And like, was that because the principle was to boycott British products? No, the principle wasn't to boycott anything. The principle was that there was like oppression and these sort of like all of the British imperialism, or whatever it was. I'm not very good with history. You know what I mean? All of that
Mhm.
stuff, right? It came from the principle of we don't want to give our money to the British because there's oppression going on. Therefore, we boycott it. But the principle wasn't we boycott the British. The principle was the principle, and then that led to the boycott. And that's the same as veganism, right? The principle is the non-participation in the exploitation of animals, which means we then boycott the meat industry, but we also boycott the zoos. We also boycott everything that exploits animals. We also boycott maybe people who we see as unethical. Like, for example, if there was a business that you knew locally, an estate agency that you knew locally, and you knew that everyone there every week they went out and practiced like blood sports, and they loved blood sports. And in the estate agency office, they had pictures of like dead animals, and they had like like the moose head and all of that hanging on their wall, and they all exploited animals all the time. You'd be like, I don't know if I want to go to this estate agency to buy my house when I could go to the other estate agency, the other side of the street, when they don't practice blood sports and they don't participate in all this horrible, horrendous stuff. Why? Well, it's nothing to do with boycotting animal products. That has nothing to do with boycotting animal products. And
I
it
agree.
has everything to do with the principles surrounding veganism, and that is that man should live without exploiting animals. And these estate agents who are going and participating in blood sports, they're exploiting animals. And if you strongly believe that man should live without exploiting animals, then you don't want anything to do with these estate agents, which are cutting off animals' heads and putting them on their wall.
Hmm. Right, but yeah, I agree. I don't pretend that this definition covers that, but I think
How
like
does your definition cover that? You have to
I know
derive.
I agree. It doesn't. I agree. It doesn't. I'm saying,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that like it doesn't attempt to encompass everything about you, and by saying this is one tactic, boycott, it allows room for like thinking of you as someone who decides to boycott things and decides to boycott other things, and like very similar to the animal to wanting the end of the animal agriculture industry is the wanting the end of animal cruelty in entertainment and things.
Right.
So
So you agree that the definition would be more suitable if it included something about ending animal exploitation rather than just saying about the behavior we should engage in without actually informing us of the principle which is at work.
no, because people are varied, and the way to advocate to people is to appeal to their interests and appeal to like whether they happen to be a consequentialist, happen to be a virtue ethicist. There's loads of ways of explaining how you came to the conclusion of veganism. I can list off a few if you want, like consequentialism, the principle of not breeding sentient life into the world to kill when you know that they will have interest to go on living longer than would be profitable. Nihilist ethics, the principle that you should be wary of inauthentically acting in a way that you don't believe due to outside social pressures, like acting uncaringly is necessary to what it means to be a man. Like these are things that we explain after we have just explained that we're doing a political campaign, we're doing a tactic that we're hoping to end the animal industry. Dead simple. Come on board. Like you don't need to like adopt this image of like what a vegan is in your mind. Like it's for everyone.
Of course, you need to adopt an image of what a vegan is in your mind, because otherwise, you have no idea of what a vegan is. You need to know that the principle of veganism has to do with the non exploitation of animals. And you can phrase that differently. If you're a consequentialist, you might say, I don't want to fund a system which, um, which reduces or it causes suffering to animals, right? You don't have to say that. You mentioned earlier something about utilitarians might come to the idea that they want to reduce animal suffering or something like this, but that just seems like a fool's errand because of the wild animal suffering issue. So normally, what we're concerned with is the animal suffering which we actually have a part in causing. And in a
Mm.
consequentialist framework, we can just say, okay, well, it's exploitative, that reduces utility or increases suffering, however you want to phrase it. Therefore, this is morally wrong. In a nihilist framework, you could say exploiting animals is in order to become the best possible person that I can be. And I'm just like, when
But
you
it
say
needn't have,
nihilist ethics, I don't take that to be like a contradiction. I'm just
yeah, metaphysics.
interpreting that to be something like Nietzsche or something, like to be the Übermensch, to strive to be the Übermensch. You're gonna have to like not exploit animals, because doing so is demeaning to your character. And in a virtue ethicist way, we could say that a virtuous person is not someone who pays for innocent animals' heads to be chopped off, right? That you can cash this out in so many different ways, and it it's perfectly compatible
You
with
can,
the
but not completely. Like, not everyone wants to include like the word exploitation in how they define their ethical system. So to some people, it's completely antithetical. Like wanting like to think about the being outcome orientated. Like
Well,
like
you could just have a different interpretation of the word exploitation in that sentence. For example, you said about freeganism.
sure.
Well, we can say, oh, well, is it
I don't disagree that you
financially
can.
exploiting animals?
I don't
Sorry?
disagree that you can. I don't disagree that you can, but but I'm just saying the immediate image when you tell someone the definition is exploitation, they're going like some like a large section of like people interested in one type of philosophy is going to be repulsed by that idea. They you can like hash it out to consequences, but like immediately things are going to come to their mind, like pets, like antinatalism, like all these things. Like they're going to think like, oh, why would you seek to end like every single exploitation, like holding the door open for someone, like obligating someone through social pressure to do that. Like it doesn't seem like a like pragmatic like thing that you could just get someone on board with, like this campaign tactic.
I just don't understand what you're even trying to say now. It just seems like some sort of like bizarre appeal to someone might be like annoyed with the word exploitation. Well,
Well,
Paul
it's just
Bashir, for
not good
example,
advocacy strategy. It's just, like
Paul,
we should define veganism by what is easiest to explain and what is easiest to get people on board with.
right,
Exploitation
and
isn't.
I think that's the 1951 definition. And Paul Bashir, for example, just swaps out the word exploitation for abuse, because he feels that abuse describes more fittingly what it is we're getting at as vegans. Like man should live without abusing animals, or something like this, right? And if you want to swap it out for abuse, maybe you just interpret the word exploitation in that sentence to be something closer to abuse. Whereas I interpret that something closer to be some sort of like exploitative relationship. Freegans might interpret that to be some sort of like financial exploitation, and that's fine. It gets used to freeganism, and then that's absolutely fine. You can eat animal products who you like as long as they're out the bin. It
No,
gets you to like all sorts of different diverse understandings of veganism, just based upon that sentence, without having to replace it with some new problematic sentence that no one's on board with. And it doesn't even and it's the behavior itself and not the principle. That's the problem. You need to define veganism using words which indicate a principle from which behavior can be derived. But you're indicating what it means with a behavior from which you need to infer a principle, and then infer the behavior from the principle that you've inferred from the original behavior. And it makes no sense to me.
it leaves it open for the person advocating to do that. Yeah. Um.
Yeah, well, it just is this vague nonsense. It
Well,
doesn't serve the point
why wouldn't you say that
doesn't
about other
serve any
boycotts, then,
purpose.
like South African boycott and
We,
stuff? How is that?
we have a perfectly workable,
No,
perfectly
it's not.
serviceable definition provided to us by Leslie Cross in 1951. Various people have come along and tweaked it to more or less successful degrees. I don't love the one that's currently on the Vegan Society page defining it, but it's better than something about boycott. Like that doesn't even give us the principle. It just doesn't. I don't. I
It
find it
it
so problematic.
okay. It does it to boycott something is to have an ethical judgment against someone, so it must contain ethics.
No, no,
But
it's not. I could just say, boycott this, and you could be like, okay, then, and have no reason why you're doing it. You're just following an order, following an instruction. Whereas if I said, don't exploit animals or don't abuse animals, don't pay for animal suffering, don't pay for animal abuse, then you know, oh, well, I shouldn't buy animal products then. And then it's the same thing. You've derived the boycott behavior from the principle. Whereas if you just say, don't boycott, then that's not giving a principle really. That's just giving a behavior you ought follow. You're laying down a rule which you ought follow, but you don't understand the principle behind the rule.
The colloquial understanding of vegan is someone who abstains from all use of animal products, food, and like leather, like clothing items. So it's the like we just have to contend with like that is how people see veganism. That's how they act in the world. It's like an action, and then why someone does that is a philosophy, and it encompasses loads of people. If you try to close it down to deontology, it's not like you're going to get it causes all these debates that are unnecessary. Like people like anti-natal, like people you meet in the street are just like, oh well, do you agree with anti-natalism? And then, or do you not like keeping pets then because you think you might be exploiting them? Like it just if you can tailor what a vegan is to the person that you're talking to, then that's brilliant. Like you like come on board with this action. It's political. Like we just want the end of the animal agriculture industry. You can do other boycotts. Like we're looking for you to do this one thing. And here are a bunch of reasons why you can do it. You can tailor it. You can use any argument you want. Marginal cases, like it's completely tailorable to what the person you're standing in front of is thinking.
Look, it doesn't even get me to acting like a vegan. The common definitions of veganism, which I think are all wrong, by the way, and I had a debate the other day about this, and the person I was debating conceded because he agreed, yeah, all of the common definitions in the dictionary seem to be wrong, not getting at what a vegan actually is. But that's beside the point, right? When I take your definition, something about boycotting animal products, that doesn't prevent me from going to the zoo. That doesn't prevent me going hunting. That doesn't prevent me engaging in all of these different types of behavior, which we as vegans would consider unethical, right? So you're just saying, oh, well, now I need to
It's
perform some hermeneutics on this, on these magical words, then derive the principle, and then infer the behavior which I must not engage in based upon like it's some weird cart before the horse inference structure
it's
in
really
order to
not. It's just a
defer.
boycott like other boycotts. And I
What was
mean,
that? Sorry.
it's really not. It's just a boycott like other boycotts. It's very descriptive. It's very useful. It's very easily conceptual to other situations in life. Like
But
we
let's
want.
just let's just look down the list of historical boycotts. Why did they boycott stuff? There was a
Mhm.
principle behind it.
Yeah, but like it could be many varied reasons. Like it doesn't have to come down to one philosophy.
Well, all you seem to be doing is saying, look, you could be an anti-natalist or something, so you might get pissed off with the word exploitation. Well, good, change the interpretation of the word exploitation. You can, in terms of pets, for example, against pet ownership, well, you could just say, oh, it's not exploitation because it's a mutually beneficial relationship where I'm caring for the pet, loving the pet, and all of this. I don't personally like pets. I don't personally um, think that we should breed and own pets and stuff like this. So that's just my personal view. There's many vegans who do think that we should have pets, and it's good because it increases utility in the world. Well, they just don't think it's exploitative. So it's perfectly fitting to say that it's an exploit, something based upon managing to live without exploiting animals. It fits perfectly. And if someone's an anti-natalist, we could just cash that out in a different way again. There's absolutely no problems with the current definition or the 1951 definition, and the new definition that you're providing just doesn't get us anywhere close to understanding what a vegan is anyway. It's even worse than the current the common dictionary definitions.
I don't think we should try to encompass everything about what a person is. I think like we should leave that open to the person advocating. I don't know. I've lost my train of thought.
Right. Well, there's one last point I want to cover before we wrap this up because I think we've said everything we've wanted to say now because we just seem to be addressing the same points
Mhm.
increasingly. Like it's starting to get repetitive now. So the one point that we've left uncovered, which I want to address, is previously you said something about if it's a deontological perspective, which the definition doesn't even have to be interpreted as, but I generally would interpret it as that,
Mhm.
as the original 1951 definition even included Kantian language. But you said something like, if we have a deontological perspective on it, there would be maybe no positive rights or something, so we wouldn't have to, as long as we're not exploiting animals, we wouldn't be obligated like to care for them or something. I heard something like this, and
I'm not
I
sure.
just can you clarify that point?
I don't remember saying anything like that. I don't know. Don't know what you're referring to.
Right. Yeah. Then I don't understand what you meant by that point earlier. Maybe that was a non-point that doesn't
When
express.
in the introduction speech.
Yeah, you were saying something like, well, then we wouldn't have to exploit them, but we wouldn't have to be
It brings,
nice to them.
I can read it back to you.
Yeah.
It brings to mind the plenty of ways we can pragmatically rescue animals and improve their circumstances, while still less obviously exploitatively keeping them captive, e.g., rescuing dogs, chickens, or horses, and excludes all other ethical systems.
Right, yeah, something like that. I think it was that part of your introductory speech. Yeah, right. So even on a deontological view, um under a Kantian morality, you can still have positive rights. You can still say that I wouldn't want to live in a world where animals that come into my garden hungry aren't fed or something like this. So you could still have some sort of like duty that you see to yourself of being nice to animals, caring for animals, going out of your way to improve the lives of animals. You can still do that on a
I don't
deontological
disagree.
framework.
I
So
don't disagree. I don't disagree. I was saying that it leaves room for vegans to both view vegans as being against all keeping animals captive, and for some minority of vegans to beat people over the head with the idea that they shouldn't be owning animals, keeping animals captive, when that's not the place that we need to be in right now for advancing veganism and advancing the boycott.
What vegans do you know who just focus all of their energy on complaining to other vegans about how they've got a cat, right?
Well, it's
No,
not only that. It's it's antinatalism. It's all these things that we can relate, that people like strawman like believe in exploitation. Like people like when Kat Von D came out as vegan on social media, that was like introducing loads of people to vegan. But then like a whole feed was like filled with antinatalists being like, "Oh, you're so terrible. You had a kid, and that's not vegan." Like it just does this like with the definition of like so restricted to exploitation. It breeds these people that think, oh yeah, that's who I am. That's how that defines everything about me. And it's
right.
just
I don't even see how you can. I don't even see where this objection is coming from that anti-natalists might be pissed off somehow with the definition of veganism. Like, why is that even the case? Your definition is no
no, not
more
pissed off. They like
suitable for
they like that.
anti-natalists than the
If it
original.
was your definition, they would love that, and I don't think it should be that.
Sorry, can you just clarify why an antinatalist would have a problem with one of the definitions, and what is there even about antinatalism which
I'm saying
creates a problem?
I'm saying a bunch of like fringe groups like antinatalists, anti pragmatically keeping pets right now, people who are like research and like spend all their life like boycotting like parent companies and like shaming other people for not being as well read on boycotting them. They love that they think that the definition includes exploitation, because it creates this like incentive to live your life with zero exploitation to any animals or humans. And if you're not doing that, we can shame you. And I just don't think that's productive.
Right. So what you're saying is because some fringe crazy people in some fringe subset of the movement are weird
Well,
and
not even that. It's like
shame people on
it's that
Twitter.
plus people who you meet on the street who you want to advocate to them. You want to like the same with like you don't like that people have in their mind that it's reducing suffering. I have the same issue with people having in their mind that it's about not exploiting, because they immediately comes to their mind all these like all these separate issues of antinatalism and stuff, and thinking that that's what they need to take on board to become a vegan.
Well, look, I've got no problem. If someone says, I am vegan, I believe that man should not exploit animals because exploiting animals causes suffering and reduces utility, and reducing utility is bad. Well, then, like, what's wrong with that?
No,
You don't.
I don't have anything wrong with that either. I think we should,
So why
but
why is this new
it doesn't
problematic
have to.
definition advantageous? Why should I adopt your new problematic definition which doesn't describe veganism properly?
It does describe the action of being vegan, and then it leaves room for you to, and then it infers an ethical stance, and then it leaves room for you to explain why you have that ethical stance, why you came to that ethical conclusion, and
Right.
that's very important to leave that open.
Well, do you want to do a closing statement?
Yeah, I mean, I've said everything I want to say. Let's see if I read notes. Yeah, I don't know, like grey areas. With every definition, there are 100 grey areas, like oysters or backyard eggs. I would just direct the conversation back to the core of getting consensus first on the ethical issue of where the majority of people get their meat from. What's important is the definition focuses the conversation and is easily accessible. I think that's what we need right now as a movement. Like maybe later we can merge other boycotts into this one, like animal cruelty, and that can be like our focus. But right now, just animal agriculture industry, not using leather, not using food, like as an ethical stance.
Okay, cool. So for my closing statement, I would say your proposed definition is a behavior which we should follow, from which we actually need to derive the principle and then infer more behavior from deriving the principle from another behavior, which seems to be putting the cart before the horse. When we think of other boycotts, there was a principle behind the boycott, so it wasn't just a boycott. There was a principle, therefore they boycotted, but it wasn't like the defining factor wasn't just that it was a boycott. Hunting is not a boycott of animal products. Going to a zoo is not a boycott of animal products, so it doesn't get us to what we think of as a vegan position by having this definition of a boycott. And different interpretations of exploitation can be made. It gets you to veganism. You could be utilitarian. You could be a deontologist. You could be a virtue ethicist. You could be a Nietzschean perspective person on this. Like, it's just compatible. So I don't see there being any problems with compatibility. I don't see there being any problems with the original definition, but I see there being problems with the new definition because it doesn't get us to veganism, and it is a behavior, not principle. So then you have to derive the principle from the behavior and then infer the behavior from the principle, which is putting the cart before the horse. So that's my closing statement. And because there wasn't any concessions, I guess we'll put it to votes. So